start by saying thank you for everyone for being here. I know just how busy this time of the year gets leading up to Christmas, and especially because it's Halloween. So instead of trick-or-treating out there, you're here with me tonight, which is fantastic. And I did actually contemplate wearing a Halloween costume tonight. Because I was doing my kids' makeup, well, one of them, their makeup, they're all getting ready to go trick-or-treating, but then I thought, you know what, maybe this topic is scary enough that I actually don't need to dress up. But no, just kidding. I'm here to simplify and to help educate HR on what Agile is. And I'm sure a number of you can agree that Agile seems to be one of those buzzwords, and people talk about a business being Agile and let's go Agile, and the understanding and interpretation of what that really means is often misunderstood. And in the simplest kind of introduction, I would say it's a way of working. It's a way of how teams work together. But it's not about activity-based working. It's not about having beautiful coloured post-it notes all over a board for a team. It's much more than that. So to kick it off, I want to look at HR and the value that we bring. So I'm going to ask you, how does HR bring value to an organisation? Keeps them out of jail. And so how do we do that though? What things do we do? Yep, policies, procedures, compliance. What else? How else do HR bring value?
Consistency. They bring consistency to the process when it would just be chaotic otherwise.
Yeah. So you've got that process there though, and then you drive consistency around it. What else do we do? I'm sure we do much more than that.
Work to support the values of an organisation.
Yes. Sometimes we're creating those values, designing them, embedding them. Okay. We're running leadership programs, putting new systems in place, building capability, a whole bunch of stuff. But now let me ask you, how do you think we could add value more? How can we increase that value? Imagine that we are building something, be it a process or embedding values or delivering a program. That value, how we would want to increase it is we want to do things around delivering it sooner to an organisation. And that might be going ahead of time, or it could be just actually doing it on time when we said we were going to do it. It could be doing it in a cheaper way, which means that we've got more budget to use somewhere else. It could be that the end result of what we're actually designing is a better final output or initiative. And along the way, you'd want it to be a much more engaging process for absolutely everyone involved. And look, when you think about these four things, you go, yeah, right, simple, easy. I know that I want to deliver something that's going to be different, that's going to have an impact. Let's do it sooner, do it cheaper. But we know it's actually not that easy because, let's face it, shit happens. Things get in the way, right? We're faced with things like timelines are changing. They want to pull it forward. They want to push it back. They want to put it on hold. Or we've got changes in structures, yet another restructure that we're faced with. We might have competing priorities, budgets that are being cut, so many different things, even changes within our own HR function where you lose a resource. So all this stuff happens, and that vision or that goal of what we wanted to deliver and that value we wanted to bring all of a sudden keeps getting pushed back and pushed back and pushed back, and you kind of end up questioning whether or not you've delivered what you set out to achieve in the first place. Who can feel like that have been in that situation sometimes? Yep, I'm sure we all have. So this is where Agile can help. So Agile is about giving you the power to deliver better value sooner. But what I'd say here, it's not about getting everything faster. What it is about being able to deliver value sooner versus doing it all faster and getting everything, okay? So let me tell you, before we get into it, let me tell you a bit about myself. I know Emma kind of did a bit of an intro. So I've always been in HR. I love HR. I will probably be in HR to the day that I die. A good stint of my career was actually at Campbell Arnott's, where I spent 12 years and really ranged from your kind of true business partnering roles all the way through to your more specialist HR roles in talent management and organisational development. I'm now the founder and director of a company called Caterfly. So we go out and partner with organisations on everything from organisational development to change management and coaching. And then I've actually got the privilege of working with Access Agile as one of their Agile trainers and coaches in the HR space. And so where this kind of interest came about, actually let me start by introducing Access Agile. So for those of you who haven't heard of Access Agile, they're the market leading provider of Agile certification training in Australia. So they've trained like 12,500 different practitioners across a range of different organisations. So I think they're sitting at, over 1,800 different organisations that they've partnered with. I've actually got the pleasure of having Colin Tan at the back. Some of you might have met Colin before. So he's one of the co-CEOs at Access Agile. And so this collaboration between myself and Access Agile actually came about because I was invited in to do some HR work with them. And as you do, I got a little bit curious around who is Access Agile and what do they do? And then because Agile is such a buzzword, that kind of curiosity led into me researching and getting quite obsessed with the topic. I then went along and did my Scrum Master certification and my Product Owner certification. And what I found is I was sitting in a room full of software developers, hearing all this amazing stuff, but trying to adopt it and adapt it to suit HR. And then at the same time, Colin and Alan, who's the other CEO, were getting this influx of calls from HR teams going, we want to go Agile, how do we bring it? And so this collaboration began where we thought, you know what, I've got the HR expertise, you guys have got the Agile expertise, let's come together and deliver something to the market. So that's what brings us here today. Okay, so let's start with the definition on what Agile HR is. So think about this in two lenses. The first one is about how HR adopts the Agile principles in the way that they operate as a function. So in the way they go about delivering value. The other piece of it is about HR rethinking their tools, their processes, their initiatives, and innovating them in a way that suits a more agile business. Now, if you just look at that second definition alone, to me, that's just good HR. We should be doing that all the time. It's when you look at them combined is what makes it Agile HR, because it's about adopting the principles and delivering more value in a different way than HR has traditionally done it. Make sense? Okay, so what are these principles? Let's start with that. So has anyone heard of the Agile Manifesto? Some have, some haven't? Okay. So imagine like 17, I can say a bit dorky, maybe software developers getting together back in 2001 and trying to figure out what is the future of software development and how can we do this better. And they basically came up with these 4 values, that they would value individuals and interactions over processes and tools, that they will value having a working product over comprehensive documentation, that they would value customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and that they would value responding to change over following a plan. Now, what's important to note here, it's that they value the items on the left more than the values of the items on the right. So it's not to say that everything that's on the right are things that they discredit and don't value. They still do. It just means that the ones on the left are more important. And as I mentioned, we've seen HR, marketing, R&D, even manufacturing, all trying to adopt Agile principles and make it work for them. So let me show you HR's version of this manifesto. It's a bit longer because we like to complicate things sometimes. So here are the values for the Agile HR Manifesto. It's about having collaborative networks over hierarchical structures. It's about valuing transparency over secrecy, adaptability over prescriptiveness, inspiration and engagement over management, intrinsic motivation over extrinsic motivation, and ambition over obligation. And again, just like with the first manifesto, there is value in the items on the right. It's just that we value the items on the left more. Okay? So if you think about this manifesto as almost being somewhat of a guide for HR, both in the way that they operate as a function, but also in the way that they think about how they can deliver better value to an organisation. Okay, so if Agile are a set of principles, think of them as a bit of an umbrella with the principles around the way that teams should work. Some of you might be thinking, well, how do I live those values? Like, what does that look like? So there are a whole bunch of different frameworks that sit underneath that. And the one that is kind of most popular and most well known is Scrum. Has anyone heard of Scrum? Some of you? And does this come to mind? But don't worry, I'm not suggesting any of you go into work tomorrow and try and get yourself in this position with everybody. The term actually was borrowed from rugby to just talk about the importance of teams in really complex environments. It's not an acronym. What it is it's an agile framework that's made up of three things: roles, artifacts, and activities. And we're going to take a look at what each of those are. But I know when I sat through my Scrum accreditation, I kept thinking, how do I make this real for HR? Because I'm sitting there and they're talking about, you know, user stories and features in software, and I'm kind of getting lost. So I wanted to bring it to life for you guys in something that we would all know. So I love leadership development, leadership training. I thought we could use this as our example because it's something that most organisations are doing, and it continues to be the one thing that sits at the top of our training budgets and we're spending most of our money on. So let's take leadership development as an example. So imagine that we are developing a new leadership program. That's our goal, that's our vision. And traditionally, we'd follow something that looked like this. We'd start with the goal as we want to develop a new leadership program for our leaders. That's the strategy. We then go into this high-level design, starting to think about, okay, what topics, what modules, how long is it going to be, a bit of a framework. We get that signed off, and then we go into this kind of long phase of building and designing that program. Everything from the slides to the activities to the pre-work and the post-action plans and all of it together. And then we go to launch the program. We might do a little pilot at the end of the build. Sometimes we don't get time because remember, shit happens and that timelines kind of keep getting pushed back and pushed back. But we launch it and then we sit there desperately waiting for the feedback to come in, going, did I hit the spot? Did I make it work? You know, that's the traditional way we've typically done things. Now the problem with this is, let's imagine for argument's sake that building a leadership program would take 6 months. And I'm not suggesting it does, but let's look at that as an example. Over that 6 months, there are two things that we're grappling with. The first one is risk, and the second one is business value delivery. So let's look at risk. So imagine, at the start, we're at 100% risk. All we've got is the idea and the strategy and the vision. Got no idea in terms of what's that going to look like and is it really going to hit the spot for my leaders. It then kind of jumps down at month 2 to around 80% because we've signed off that high level design. So we kind of got a little bit of verification that what we want to do in this space is kind of there. But we sit with that risk around truly knowing that what we've developed is going to change the behaviour of our leaders, build new capabilities, take away all the bad habits. We won't really know that until it's launched at month 6. Make sense? The other risk that come with it is we're just not developing our leaders for 6 months. Now, the other bit I mentioned was around business value delivery. So again, on the flip side, while we're building the program, we aren't really delivering any value to the business, because we're sitting there holding onto this content, trying to pretty it up, get it all ready to then go out with this big bang launch around how fantastic HR is and look at the amazing program that we've built. So again, business value delivery doesn't hit until the program is actually launched. Okay? So that's the traditional way of doing it. This is the agile way of doing it. So again, it looks very different. What you will see at the top is what we call feedback loops. So agile ways of working is about breaking it down into chunks and doing it in what they call an incremental and iterative way. So it's about breaking it down, and then through each piece, you're successively refining that end goal because you're getting feedback each time you deliver a piece. So let's think of this as the leadership program example. Imagine we break it down by modules or topics or learning outcomes. You then go away and you build that piece completely within a sprint. And at the end of that sprint, you've got the opportunity through different ways, whether you go do a mini launch or whether you just use what they call a stakeholder review meeting to get validation and verification that what you've just built is exactly going to meet the needs of the audience, and you pull that into the next build and so forth. So you can see how they're quite different between the waterfall approach and this one. So again, thinking about the two things that we talked about, risk and business value delivery, here's how risk turns. So the red is your traditional waterfall approach, and the blue line is the agile way of doing it. So you can see with each sprint, we are actually reducing that risk along the way because we've got these multiple feedback loops that are giving us the opportunity to make sure that what we are doing is exactly meeting the needs of the audience, okay? And then again, on business value delivery, the steps go up. You have the opportunity to do mini modules and mini launches of the content that you've got ready to deliver to your audience. But let's say you wanted to go out with a big bang. You didn't want to get leaders coming along the way through mini modules. You wanted to run that full day or that 2-day program. But then let's imagine that one resource in your team resigned, and they were your one key resource building the program, and you're 4 months in. So you're kind of 3/4 of the program there. And so you're then faced with having to go to market, recruit someone else, onboard them. Your team capacity is at kind of -10 because everyone is just swamped. Going an agile way means that if you had to, you could really launch the 3/4 program as a program because you broke it down and created it in pieces that were completely finished, verified pieces. You could take that and actually go out to the business and deliver that value sooner. Does that make sense? So very different way of looking at it. So this slide is the reason why I didn't wear my Halloween outfit today. Because I remember, and actually Colin was running my Scrum Master and my Scrum Product Owner session, and he put this up, and I'm like, whoa, I think I'm in the wrong course. Like HR, our charts don't look like this at all. Like it is just too scary. So let me break it down for you. I want you to walk away from today thinking about Scrum in 3 parts. There are roles, there are artifacts, and there are activities. And all of those provide guidelines for how a team can work in an agile way, which is all about delivering value sooner. So let me break it down. So let's look at the roles. We all know we've got stakeholders up the top, right? We either love them, we hate them, but they kind of set the vision and the strategy. And we know we have to please them, okay? So you've got this vision. Then there are 3 key roles when it comes to Scrum. There's the product owner, the Scrum Master, and the development team. Now, don't worry too much about titles. These are very much the software kind of development titles, and what we're finding is people are actually, even in software, changing those titles. So let me talk through the purpose of each of those roles so you can understand the different ways that they play in this space. So the product owner, you would sometimes call this person the initiative owner. They actually take that vision and they bring it to life for the team. So they set the vision, they basically spell out and communicate what that team need to build, why it's important, and then they prioritise the order around how that's built, okay? Or the whiteboard's a bit far. If I write stuff on the whiteboard, will people see? Yes? Okay. So I want to bring it to life for this example with leadership. So imagine you've got your product owner. And I'm a lefty. Someone else said, so am I? You've got to make sure that the pen doesn't get on the side. Okay, so in this sense, if you think of the product owner as potentially being the head of HR, the head of OD, might even if it's a smaller organisation be the CEO or MD, they're the person that's telling HR, we want a new leadership program and I want it to look something like this to meet this particular need, okay? So let's call this person like a HRD or the OD lead. Okay. The other role I want to talk to you about is the Scrum Master, which I think is a pretty cool title. Like, I'm a Scrum Master, but I know other people will go, what the hell is that? And you're not the master of me, so get out. But the Scrum Master is essentially what we call the process owner. So their whole piece is about making sure that the team work in a particular way. So they govern the process of how that team work together, okay? They can also be part of the team in terms of actually building that leadership program and getting into the detail, but their primary focus is on facilitating Scrum activities and about making sure that the team work in an agile way. So that's your Scrum Master. So really, it could be anyone because they essentially are the team coach. And some people call them the servant leader because it's about removing barriers for the team to let them do their best and focus on what's important. And then the last group, it's not an individual, is the development team or just the team. The important thing to note with the development team is it is a collection of all the skills and experience that is needed to deliver that vision. Because what you're trying to eliminate here is handoffs, where you then have to take what you're doing, hand it over to another department or another individual. It's not that important for them, so you then sit waiting, having to convince them to get back to you by a certain time, and it pulls everything back. So this is about making sure that you've got every type of skill and experience that you need to deliver that vision or deliver that outcome. And normally Scrum looks at this as being a team of, say, 3 to 9 people. That's kind of the nice number that they look at. So again, if we think about this in terms of the example of the leadership program, you know, we might have L&D in there, you'd hope. We might have HR services in there. They might be doing all the admin coordination around things, looking at who's going to be of attendance. We might even have, dare I say, IT in there as part of the team if it's going to be an online module or a virtual session. So lots of different skills that we would be able to bring in. And again, it depends on the vision. So what you're looking for is a collection of individuals that have a really deep skill set to offer, but that have the ability to actually work across a broad range of activities, which is, anyone heard of T-shaped skills? And that's really having that deep expertise, but working across the level. So they're the roles. That's the roles in Scrum and what the Scrum team would look like. We then get to artifacts. And this is where it kind of sounds a bit more kind of, you know, techie and software, and Colin, this is your bread and butter, you love this. So there are 3 key artifacts in Scrum. The first one is what we call the product backlog, and almost see this as this exhaustive list of everything that needs to be done to deliver that vision. But when I say that, it's not to the detailed plans where it spells out every single detailed task that you need to do to deliver it. It could be as simple as we want a 360-degree survey in there, and you don't get into all the steps that you need to take. The product owner basically prioritizes which things we need to look at next, and you then don't break them down until you want to move it into the sprint. So you've got this product backlog that's full of features and tasks and fixes and questions, and you don't worry about it, you leave it there. It's then about taking it and thinking about what are the priorities that we now need to look at for this next sprint, which is typically a 2-week period, but some organisations do it differently. Pulling that across, and it's when you pull it across that it sits in what we call the sprint backlog. And that's where you then pull it to bits even more, and you start to get really specific around what that particular task is. So as an example, imagine the product backlog is, we know we want to do a 360 survey as part of our leadership program. That might be enough detail for the product backlog. When it then moves along to the sprint backlog, we might break it down further by saying, are we going internal or external? What budget do we have for our 360s? Do we prefer LSI? Do we want to go down the Hogan's path? What have our leaders used? What's been the feedback? So you can start to see you don't spend time investing in that level of detail until it actually falls into the sprint and what the team are going to work on. And it's at that sprint backlog, and you can see there's a little diagram, that's where you see these colourful post-it notes on a board, because that reflects all the activities that team are committed to achieving within that sprint. Okay? The last artifact I want to talk to you about is at the top there, called DOD, which stands for Definition of Done. Okay? See this as a gateway and as a bit of a quality check. So remember we talked about breaking down the program into different pieces and completely designing that in a way that you're ready to then go and deliver it. That definition of done is basically making sure that it is done and you are ready to launch if we said go tomorrow. So it could be things like having it proofread, having it branded, maybe showing the connection to the dots to a leadership framework. So it's about all those little checklists that actually determine for you that that piece is completely done in a satisfactory or high level way, ready to launch tomorrow if we needed to. Okay? And then the last piece is activities. And this is where, and Colin can agree, we're starting to see HR kind of borrow the activities. We're seeing less of them taking the other pieces of Scrum. They're more borrowing some of the activities that exist in Scrum. So the first one, which a lot of people would know, is what they call the daily Scrum or the daily stand-up. And that's that quick 10, 15-minute meeting, which is why they try to do it standing up so it's not longer than that. And it's really the purpose of that meeting is to just synchronise the work that needs to be done in that day and to get everyone on board. Okay? Then there's the review. So again, if we think about this in terms of that leadership program, this is the review with stakeholders. It's the chance to say, within this sprint, here is what we've achieved, and it's there to give you feedback. So it's not only to show how amazing you are and how much work you've done, the purpose of it is the feedback loop. It's to make sure that you walk away from that review going, are we on track? Are we nailing it? Have we met the brief? Is this going to make a difference to our leaders? And you pull that in so that you can successively refine your end result each way. So remember we talked about that, the 4 things that you can do to increase sooner, cheaper, better. That better piece is because of the constant and continuous feedback loops that Agile brings. And then the last one is called the retrospective, which some people just call the retro. And this is almost like a mini project debrief or a project review, but it isn't on the actual piece of work. The review is on how well the team worked together. So it's that, it can be formal, but most of the time it's quite an informal conversation. It's a chance for the team, and again, the role the Scrum Master plays in facilitating that conversation. What worked? What did we do well? What didn't work? And what could we do better next time? So again, you're not just refining the product each time you go through a sprint, but you're also refining how the team improve each time you go through a sprint. Now, that is Scrum and Agile at like a very high level. We typically would spend a whole day, if not sometimes 2 days, getting down into the detail of this. Because even though I broke it up to say it's about roles, artifacts, and activities, underneath all of that are a set of templates, tools, techniques, and practices that help you live into those roles or help you live into those activities. And that's really what myself and Access Agile are doing, is about helping HR think about what they need to deliver and helping them understand what Agile brings, how they can do it in a more agile way, and then partnering them. So it could be leadership. It could be that they need a new HRIS system. It could be that they're going to a new payroll system, or they're embedding new values in the organisation. And HR know that there is an opportunity to do things differently. So our role is about partnering with organisations so that we can firstly educate them on what Agile actually is, and then work side by side as they start to use those new ways of working. So I know that's a huge amount of information. I do have a little takeaway for you. I've actually got a blog that I've written that's on Access Agile's site called What is Agile HR? It summarises a lot of what I've just shared, and I've got my next blog to that series coming out next week, which actually looks at Agile teams. So if you're interested in getting a copy of that, my details are on there, so please reach out. But in saying that, I want to open the floor and give you all an opportunity to ask any questions that you might have of myself or even Colin if it's more specific to Access Agile. Or have I scared you enough without my Halloween costume? You can come and find me at the end if you prefer. But again, thank you. I hope, if anything, you walk away from today with a clearer understanding of what Agile is. Because if you're like me in some of the conversations I'm in, I'm hearing, oh, Agile is, we're activity based, I've got Agile ways of working, or my work lets me work 1 day a week from home, that's Agile. I hope you've walked away with a clearer idea of actually what Agile is, the benefits around it, and how teams can work differently using an Agile way. So thank you for being here. It was lovely meeting you all. Thank you.